Welcome to Transformational Leaders in Transformational Times, a series of webinars featuring the founder of Being at Full Potential, Mark Vandeneind, and today's guest is Andrew Thornton of Budgeons, a supermarket in London, England. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, before we dive in, I propose that we just take a moment to make ourselves comfortable, to put aside anything that we may have been occupied with before, just so we can become fully present to this next hour. And I also want to take the opportunity to reground ourselves in the intention of this webinar series. So the intention that we have been holding is to bring these amazing stories to light. So these clients that we've been working with, fortunate to be working with over the last couple of years, are all great examples of transformational leaders who have found the courage and found the inner calling to bring their visions, to bring their aspirations to life. And there's some amazing stories to tell, and we felt it was time to shine the light on that and to give, to bring this out into the world. The second intention, which we talked a little bit about in our first webinar, is to also recognize and acknowledge the transformational leader that is within all of us. And for some of us, it's perhaps already very highly expressed, and for others, it's maybe still a seed that we're starting to recognize and starting to get in touch with. But just acknowledging that transformational leader within, how important it is, especially in these times, in these transformational times, where I think most of us can now acknowledge that the status quo isn't sustainable anymore, and we need to really step up and find new and better ways of being with each other and of creating the future together. And of course, being at full potential is very much in service to that intention. And so, we felt called to bring these webinars and bring these stories to life for you all. So thank you for that. And now I would like to introduce my friend, Andrew Thornton, my partner in this work, my friend, collaborator, and fellow heart entrepreneur. Andrew is the owner of a supermarket in North London called Thornton Budgeons. And this is a very special supermarket, as we will hear in today's call. It is a supermarket that has found a very a brilliant way, actually, of competing in the extremely competitive supermarket industry. As you all probably know, independent retailers have a very, very hard time staying competitive to all the big players. And Andrew and his staff and his people at Thornton Budgeons have found a way to not only survive, but in many cases also thrive in that environment. And he will share with us how they have done that and kind of the secret to that story. Andrew also...
Thank you, Mark. Hi. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, so Andrew also, the supermarket is not just a supermarket, it's also what he sometimes refers to as a lab or a playground to bring the concepts and the principles of heart in business to life. And so, as he sees, as it starts to bear fruit and to work, it's also an opportunity for Andrew to bring these insights to other business leaders who are looking to bring more heart into their businesses as well. So Andrew advises people in this area and is now also writing his book called, or working title being Putting the Heart Back into Business, which we will be very happy to hear more about at some point, Andrew, when you're done. So then let us get started. And to do that, I'm going to share my screen. And I want want to bring up one image that, for me, represents the story of Thornton budgets. You know, if one image can tell, a whole story, then this image would be it. And Andrew, I would love for you to share the story behind this image a little bit, if you can. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you for that lovely introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and to see some familiar names and some new names on the participant list. I had a midlife crisis about 15 years ago, where I was running a consultancy, doing very well in theory, and kind of sort of woke up one day to think, is this really it? Is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? And that led me, I somewhat joke that particularly men in their 40s, when they have midlife crisis, go and do things like buying Porsches and having affairs, whereas I went and bought a couple of supermarkets. One of the things that I realized I was trying to do in buying, initially two, but I now have one supermarket in North London, was to find a different way to run a business. And for me, I've realized it's all about heart, and about heart is about getting to know yourself more so you can open your heart more in life. And I think in terms of, Mark, you're absolutely right about we're at such a critical time in the world. And I don't believe that it's possible to run an organization that's either treating people really badly or trashing the planet if you have an open heart. Because as soon as you open your heart, then you start to recognize and see the damage that's being done. So we've been playing with heart at the supermarket for 7 years now, since I was in India in 2013, and I had this profound insight that what I was grappling for was heart. I was even in an ashram in Pune, and I ended up doing a creative painting course. And Mark, you've been in my little room in the back of the store. There's a huge canvas. And on this course, I was encouraged by the teacher to start painting. And I started painting, and this big heart emerged. So along that journey, one of the things we've been doing is coaching people internally to be in flow. So we define being in flow as doing the things you're really good at and love doing. And you can do a simple 2x2 matrix where you put in where you spend most of your tasks around that matrix. And you can put in the top right-hand corner the things that you love doing and you're really good. How this links to tomatoes is that when one of my colleagues was running this with my other colleague, Celine, who runs our fruit and veg department, who's been in the store for many, many years, longer than I've owned it. Celine put building things and being creative in what he loved doing and what he was really good at. And his coach asked him, well, do you get to do that at work? And he said, well, not really. I've been a bit discouraged. And he kind of told a story about how he'd built a display many, many years ago. And some boss came along to him and said, oh, what'd you do that for? That looks like shit, or some words to that effect. And that boss probably forgot that comment 10 seconds later on, but it had an impact on Celine. So his coach encouraged, well, why don't you, we kind of encourage people to try things different. Why don't you try it again? She encouraged him and encouraged him that it was a safe thing to do. In Thornton's Budgeons, we were, really on a journey of helping people be more creative and find themselves more. So he built this tomato display, quite a, modest but nice at the entrance. And he gets loads of positive feedback from me, from customers, from other colleagues, and he starts selling more tomatoes. So he builds a bigger one and a bigger one and a bigger one. And this photograph only zooms into a part of it. It's actually, in the height of the British tomato season, it's probably 3 meters wide by 2 meters high. And all of this is, Celine just rooted around the warehouse. It didn't cost a penny to build this. He rooted around the warehouse. He found an old cart, baskets. One day I went in, he was on his hands and knees nailing a post to the back of the cart so we could prop up and go a bit higher. Now, not only did we then start to sell loads more tomatoes, in fact, loads of more fruit and veg, the whole store, what better message than a fresh food store to have something like this when you come in? This says, this stuff here is really, really fresh. But not only that, his colleagues started to think, well, crumbs, if he can do it, I can do it. So the whole level of display across the whole store improved dramatically. Seelan also grew in confidence. To me, he suddenly looked a few centimeters taller than he used to. And he spoke and he engaged with customers much more than he used to. And he's transformed, and he's shared with his family and his friends just what a huge moment this was in his life. So that is the story, Mark, of the tomatoes.
Yeah.
Or tomatoes, as you guys say in North America.
Tomatoes. Thank you so much, Andrew. Beautiful story there. And, what occurs to me is the importance of words, and how important our words are, and how, as we become aware of what may seem unimportant to one person will seem very important to another person, right? And to the previous manager who said, what are you doing? He forgot about it probably, but to the person receiving it, it was, it can last for a very long time. So I definitely take that away as how important it is, our choice of words, and how we hold people in their potential.
Yeah, and Mark, I've just been, as you said, I'm working on my book, and literally the hour and a half before, I tried to write for an hour and a half every day. I was just doing it before we came on this call, and I was talking about how when we're really young kids, we're full of the joys of spring, and then we close down and we close down and we close down, we shut down. Parents, teachers, bosses say things that shut us down, and we end up only bringing part of ourselves to our full life and to our work. And what happened here was Seelan brought a whole part of his life that he didn't feel safe to bring to work now. And that transformed him and many, many other people. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Great example. Now, I know that, you were already on this journey before we met, but then there was a point where we met, and you were one of the pioneers in adopting and taking on this human potential assessment within your store. I think pretty much the whole staff took it at one point. Can you share a little bit about, the key finding there, and how it led to further promote this idea of self-leadership even further within the store?
Yes, prior to us meeting Mark, I had been for a number of years, a very similar journey to you actually, looking to see how can you measure the heart? Because there's this adage in business that what gets measured gets done. And I remember one of my old college mates, Anne, pushing me one day saying, you've got to measure it. It's all great, but if you don't measure it, business leaders are not going to listen to you. So I was seeking for this. And thanks to this amazing customer of mine called Lawrence Bloom, who happened to stumble in as Lawrence's way into one of Mark's workshops, just completely randomly. He wasn't invited, but that's just a typical sort of Lawrence thing. He came back and he said, oh, you've got to meet this guy, Mark, and his partner, Sajid. So we talked, and I said, this sounds amazing. It's something we really want to do. So we measured, everybody in the store, all 85 people in the store, took this assessment. And also, because we had already started to do a lot of this work, we weren't in a sort of a pre and post sort of measurement. So we couldn't, it would have been lovely if I'd met Mark, 3 or 4 years previous, and we could have done it at the early part of our heart journey, but we hadn't done that. So I got another Budgeons, which is a franchise, a small franchise in the UK, not very far away from us, also very well run, and I persuaded the owner to also for all of his team to do the assessment, so we could see the difference between the two. And I was, although I was, working with Mark on developing this idea and how we could apply it elsewhere, in this instance, I was the client, and we discussed how we would engage the team and agreed that we should get all the senior people, and in the old language of the store, the managers and supervisors. And we got them all together, and it was appropriate, I think. We ended up in a Quaker meeting house, which happens to be nearby the supermarket. When one of my colleagues was trying to find a room and came back and said, I found this place. Yeah, it's a Quaker meeting house. Immediately I thought, wow, that is fortuitous. And in fact, we ran, many other events there subsequently. And we all sat in a circle. And I had agreed with Mark, I was going to stay pretty quiet because I can be you know, slightly overpowering, talk a lot. I'm an Irishman, I've kissed the Blarney Stone and all that. But I was going to be really quiet. And these things that are on the screen are the organization performance metrics, which those of you familiar with the model will know. Those of you aren't, effectively, they are measures of organizational effectiveness, but they're from the bottom up about, that's a combination of the scores of all the people in the supermarket and how they show up on a daily basis. And in the language of being at full potential, there's no such thing as good and bad. There's under and over expressed. So Mark said to the team, where do you guys think you as a group of people and as a collective organization, Thornton's Budgeons, are most expressed on these dimensions? And people said customer orientation. And Mark said, yeah, that's absolutely the highest score. And then he said, where would you, as a group of about 15 individuals, all of whom had worked there, everybody but one had been there longer than me. So the average length of service now is 15, 16, 17, 18 years. At the time, this is like 4 or 5 years ago, so a little bit less than that. He said, where would you as a group of individuals, individually and collectively, like to develop? Now, I was chomping at the bit to say inventiveness, because if that's the sort of character I'm at, but I'd agreed I would keep my mouth shut. And there was this very lengthy silence. It was probably only 30 seconds, but it seemed like about 5 minutes where nobody said anything. And then simultaneously, 5 or 6 people said self-leadership. So it wasn't like Jeff said it and then Mark said, oh, that's a good idea. And then Fred said it and everybody was following somebody's lead. Literally simultaneously, 5 or 6 people said self-leadership. And in that moment, everything at Thornton's Budgeons changed, because then we went on a self-leadership journey. Now, if we'd chosen inventiveness or customer orientation, well, that was our highest score, or employee engagement, we would have gone on a different journey. And I don't think there's any such thing as a good journey or a bad journey or a right answer or a wrong answer. It was just in the moment that was chosen. And anytime I tell that story, I can feel shivers going up my spine, because that was the moment where we then launched ourselves onto a self-leadership journey, which somewhere in we have a manifesto, which we've worked with Mark and some of his colleagues later on. And in it, there's a definition of what self-leadership is defined as in being at full potential speak. And I don't have it here with me, but it's basically something along, I'm going to paraphrase here, something along the lines of going on a discovery, of learning about yourself so that you can be a better leader. That's the gist of it, Mark, yeah?
Yep.
So what we went on is, how do we help people learn more about themselves? And we'd already started the tomato. This was the tomato story had come before that. So we'd already started that. We just hadn't named it. So we start on, how can we get people to learn more about themselves and take more responsibility and do more in flow stuff? So how do we reorganize responsibilities so that, Jeff, if you hate doing admin, okay? And this is my favorite example. But I love admin. Well, actually the other way around, but anyway, maybe. Then it's crazy to most companies' appraisals and development reviews spend the whole time telling Jeff how he needs to get better at doing admin. Crazy, waste of time. Much better for Jeff to say, actually, you know something, Andrew, you're really good at admin. But Andrew, I hate making cold calls. I hate speaking to people I don't know. Whereas you're really good at it. And we swap over that responsibility. So we've done a lot of responsibility swapping over the years. And there was a load of stuff I used to do. The stock meeting is my favorite example. Stock, anybody who's ever worked in retail knows stock is critical. If you're not in control of your stock, you are out of business within a very short period of time. And it was felt by the team that because I was the owner, if I didn't go to the stock meeting every month, then it would be perceived that I didn't think stock was important. And I hated it. And I was actually probably disruptive and a pain in the ass and everything. And after this, I stopped going. I have not been to a stock meeting for 4 or 5 years. And is stock control better or worse as a result? I think it's better, actually, because we're leaving people who are good at stock control to do stock control, rather than trying to force me, who's no interest in stock control, to be involved in stock control. Now, I've got 2 really... So this... Mark, you're going to help me on dates. This was probably
2017.
2015, 16?
17, I think.
17, gosh, okay.
Early
Gosh,
17.
time.
Yeah.
Wow. I've really struggled sometimes with putting things into time dates. 2017. And I want to give you two examples, one in 2018 and one in 2020, that demonstrated self-leadership in action. So in 2018, in April 2018, a Dutch organization called Ecoplaza launched the first plastic-free zone in the world. So they had a section, plastic-free aisle, a section in a supermarket in Amsterdam that had all plastic-free products. Now, Thornton's Budgeon's purpose, and I'm a real believer that organizations need to have a purpose. Our purpose is we are the community supermarket that really care about people and planet. So that's the abbreviated version. There you can see with some of my team, including my son, my youngest son, who is working temporarily, who's just to the left of me. So that's our vision and that's our purpose. So when I saw this thing about what they'd done with Ecoplaza, it was like, you know, that is so up our street. And first, the bit of me originally was like, shit, why didn't we think of doing that? That's such a great idea. Because David Attenborough's Blue Planets 2 series had just hit the decks, and suddenly the whole world was like, oh crumbs, we have a problem with plastic. A problem that lots of people have known about for decades, but David Attenborough brought into people's living room. So I was like, crumbs, we can make a difference here. And fortuitously, I managed to get to meet someone from A Plastic Planet who'd worked with them, with Ecoplaza. And in the summer, in July of that year, Sean came in to see us. And we sat, 4 or 5 of us, in the little room with the big heart on the wall. And we watched a film called A Plastic Ocean, which if you're on Netflix, I would strongly recommend watching. We watched it. And at the end of it, we all looked at each other and said, we have to do something. There wasn't a choice. We have to. If we are the community supermarket that really cares about people and planet, we're given this opportunity to do something. We've got to do something. And what we decided to do, we thought the idea of a plastic-free aisle was interesting, but customers don't shop. Putting all mixture of fruit and veg and baked beans and washing powder all in one section didn't really make any sense to us. It was amazing what Ecoplaza did, and we felt we could move it to the next level. So we decided we would come up with a number of plastic-free zones all around the store in every single category. And after a bit of research over the summer, on the 1st of September, we said on the early part of November, in 10 weeks' time, we are going to launch 1,500 plastic-free lines. Now, why 1,500? Well, Ecoplaza had 750, so it seemed like a good sort of number. But what I threw that out there, but what I said to everybody and what we agreed was, it's not the number we launched that matters. And there were times when people came and said, oh, we're not going to be ready by then. Let's put it off to the new year. And my view was, it's a line in the sand. It doesn't matter how many it is. The fact is we're going to do something. So what you can see on this picture here on the left is the entrance of the store. So you can imagine the tomato display is slightly to your right, so you've now passed the tomatoes bit. This is our produce department, as you guys would call it in North America, which used to be 50-50 between plastic wrapped and loose. And what you can see now is we turned 85% of it into loose. There's a little section on the left, beyond, just slightly out of view, where you can see a couple of people standing, where we had the stuff that was still in plastic, because like salad bags and berries and certain things that we found it difficult to get out of plastic easily anyway. Now, the first thing that strikes you when you come into the store is how beautiful it looks, because plastic is actually really ugly. And on that launch, we actually launched, despite everybody thinking we weren't going to be ready, with 1,800 plastic-free lines, on November 8th, 2018. And we did this for 3 reasons. The first was to be responsible for putting less plastic into the environment. Secondly, to give our customers and people in the area the chance to shop plastic-free if they wished. And thirdly, and most importantly, to show the big supermarket players that it wasn't as difficult as they let on. If little old Thornton's Budgeons with one shop in North London could do this in 10 weeks, why the hell couldn't someone with the resources of Tesco or Walmart globally start to deal with this? And I don't want to be arrogant about this, But this changed the bar on plastic-free worldwide. And we had visits from every single senior supermarket executive in the UK, many European countries, from as far as wild as Canada and Australia, to look at what we were doing. And kind of a number of them said, crumbs, okay, we really need to do something different here. And I think two players in the UK certainly that made a big difference as a result of this were Tesco and Iceland. And Tesco is really interesting. Their CEO actually, him and I have become actually quite close at this stage. He came to visit us. We went to see him. We've been advising and supporting on this. And he really probably, who's just Dave Lewis, who's just stepped down recently, he really, Tesco has probably taken more action, certainly in the UK, than any other player on this field. And I said to Mark, I had a lovely LinkedIn message from somebody in Spinneys in Dubai the other day, who had worked at Iceland, had come to see the store, and was telling me that they were taking he'd moved to Dubai and he was taking the plastic-free journey there. So how this connects with self-leadership, I think, is I don't believe without self-leadership we could have done what we did in such a short period of time, because everybody was totally focused. There was no question there's a core team of 4 or 5 people working alongside a core team from a plastic planet, and everybody on our side and their side, and again, we couldn't have done it without them, on our side and their side, knew this is the right thing to do, and we're totally committed to it. And I can sit here and I can take the glory, and I presented this all around the world and stand on stage, but ultimately they were the people who burnt the midnight oil, working all hours, stupid hours, trying to get this all together. And they did this because they believed in it, and they believed in it because of our purpose and the approach of self-leadership. They were involved in making a decision to do this. It wasn't my decision, it was our decision, and they were totally committed to it.
Yeah.
And on the day of the launch, we had the actor Jim Broadbent, who plays Horace Slughorn in Harry Potter for Harry Potter fans, who's a customer and local resident, who cut the ribbon for us. And on that day, I had 3 people come to me in the team and say this is the proudest day of their working lives. And they weren't kids. These were people in their 40s and 50s who've been working for 20 plus 25 years. And I must say, that moment is one of the most touching moments of my working life, to see people so moved by the contribution they could make to the world through their work. So not only did we impact people, other retailers, but also, do you know something? Our sales went up. Our sales went up by 6% for the first 2 weeks, and then settled at 4%. Now, anybody who's in retail, particularly food retail, knows you can spend millions and millions of pounds, dollars, euros refitting supermarkets, and you don't get 4 or 5, 6% uplift in sales. It's a big number. And that, of course, helped us with selling the case to the other retailers as well, because we were saying, look, people want this. Customers out there are crying out for solutions to the plastic crisis, the climate crisis, and they will reward retailers who make it easy for them to do that. So that's my first example.
Brilliant, Andrew. If I can just add one thing in here, because I had the opportunity to meet with the team in a workshop that we did right after the launch, or soon after. And I remember that sense of pride that I was feeling amongst the staff at that time. And it was pride, it was a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning in their work. And there was one statement that always stuck with me, and it was their language, and they used this expression, we had each other's back, right? So they were thrown in this pressure cooker, right, where it almost seemed impossible to deliver in 10 weeks.
Yeah.
But then they were saying that the reason why we could do it because we felt like we had each other's back.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such a simple, but such a powerful statement that basically, for me, sums it up really beautifully.
Yes. I'm just turning some light on here because the sun is starting to go down here, and we're going to be in darkness. Yes, absolutely.
I'm just having a check on the time, Andrew, because we definitely want to keep space open for some Q&As, and we want to make sure that we do honor everyone's time and close in the next half an hour.
Yep.
So, I know there's actually 2 or no, at least one great example of self-leadership that you want to share. So if you can do that, like in the next, so let's say we'll take 5 more minutes.
Yep.
To cover that, and then we can open it up. And I'll also already encourage people just to think about what questions you may have for Andrew. And we found a way for people to raise their hand, and also to be able to ask their questions directly. So you don't have to type it up in the chat like we did last time, but you can just raise your hand, and we'll then unmute you, and you can then ask your question directly to Andrew.
Okay, thank you.
There you go, Andrew.
Yeah, so my second story, and I will be very concise. I will try not to be too Blarney Stone about it. In March this year, middle of March, COVID was really starting to kind of, the seriousness of the situation was starting to embark. Countries were starting to lock down. The UK being a bit slow, still hadn't done that yet. And I was diagnosed with adrenal fatigue, which is sort of burnout. I'd been diagnosed in February, but the person I was thinking about it said to me in the middle of March, if you don't take some serious time off now, you're going to get yourself very sick. And if you were an employee, I'd be getting you signed off for 3 months. And I part live between the UK and Germany, so I'm in southern Germany at the moment. And I was about to cancel my trip planned for sort of middle of March to spend 10 days here, to stay in the supermarket to support them, because we were really starting to see panic buying going on. Things were getting crazy. And as a result of what I was told to do medically, I reversed that decision and actually went to Germany earlier. I went to Germany on the 15th of March, I think it was, and didn't return to the UK till the 1st of August, because actually I was a lot worse than I thought I was. And what that meant is I left my self-leadership team in charge of the operation at the most challenging time in our history. And to give you a perspective, I think it was the last week in March or the first week in April, our sales were up 97% on last year. So we almost doubled the volume, typical volume, as people were panic buying and stock buying. And 40% of the team were off, self-isolating. They either had the virus, there was no testing going on at the time, so they felt they had the virus, they've had somebody in the family had the virus, or for whatever reason, following the guidelines, they were supposed to be self-isolating. So you try and run a business where you double your turnover and you have your number of people in the company. Not only did we survive through that, we were the only people in the area who had toilet rolls. We had flour. We had pasta. And not only this being Belsize Park in North London, it wasn't only we had pasta, we had good quality pasta. Thornton's Budgeons have toilet rolls. And I remember on the Sunday before I went, going around the local Morrison's, which is a huge, big, 8,000 square meter hypermarket, 10 minutes from the store. And walking around and seeing, and I took photographs of vast sections, whole big 10, 15 meter long sections, empty, no stock whatsoever. And then going back up to Thornton's Budgeons and all our shelves were full. So our team managed that process on their own with very little, a bit of Zoom with me, a bit of discussions about difficult decisions. And then we had to make difficult decisions, lots of difficult decisions, like reducing opening hours, for example, so that we could cope with what we were trying to do. So that to me, so I've worked myself out of a job almost. And since I've got back, I'm not back intervening in the things that I was involved in before, because there's no need. The team demonstrated to me perfectly capably and themselves that they were capable of doing that. So I now get told I go back and I say, oh, okay, well, that looks interesting. Or I'm told, oh, yeah, we've done this. Or sometimes I find out, a bit later, this is what's been done, which is wonderful. I mean, for me as a leader, one of the most rewarding things is to find out afterwards something that's happened. And even if I disagree with it, it's not what I would have done. It doesn't actually matter. The fact is people are taking a risk, they're prepared to do it. And the great thing about supermarket retailing is if it's a bad decision, it's generally very easy to reverse it and do something else. Mm-hmm. So that's my second self-leadership example now.
And I remember very well, Andrew, also, I was in the room at the time when it felt like a very significant moment where I think you were assuming people thought that you trusted them fully and that they were allowed to take decisions within their area of influence. So you had a certain expectation towards people, and I think people were generally not aware of that expectation that you had, or not aware of that permission. And I remember that moment where you just simply we became aware that there was a disconnect, right, in expectations or understanding. And once you became aware of that, you looked people in the eye and you said, yes, I give you permission, I trust you, take decisions and make mistakes if you have to, let's learn from them. And I remember that just being one of those really profound moments where people were like, wow, that I received that, I felt like it was really received in quite a deep way.
Yes, Mark, and I think one of the keys to all of this approach of doing things is safety and behavior. So I could have said that in the meeting. If then 2 weeks later, when you took a risk, I bit your head off for it, end of, the whole thing gone. So, us as leaders, we have to lead by example, and we have to, we will be judged by our actions, not our words. It's really easy. Talk is cheap. It's really easy to say things, but you've got to act on them. And that was a pivotal moment, backed up by me, but also some of the other senior leaders in the company. Embracing that approach is absolutely critical.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. Really great stories, lots of richness in this half an hour. So I would love to open it up now for some questions. I see some hands up. Jeff, would you like to facilitate this Q&A?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll be happy to. I just suggest to people, if they have a question, that they raise their hand. I believe you'll see an icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen to do that. And then Mark will unmute you and you can ask it directly rather than have to write it out. So that will make it easier and perhaps faster for everyone.
So Monica, I am unmuting you, Monica.
Well done. Can you hear me?
There you go. We hear you.
Hear you loud
Okay.
and clear.
Awesome.
Can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your story, Andrew. It's very inspiring and reassuring at the same time. And I do have a question. You mentioned that you collectively decided in which direction to go in your business. Did you also collectively establish your value statements and the purpose, or was that something that just came more from you, or was that a collective effort as well?
So the purpose was created about 7 or 8 years ago, and that was a collective process. We did some research into our customers and what our customers thought about us so far, and that statement came out of that collective. So we had a researcher presenting back what our customers thought, and there was probably 10 of us. I had 2 stores at the time across both stores discussing it. So that was created. Subsequently then, in 2018, just after the plastic-free launch, working with Mark and Vanessa, one of the other Being at Full Potential team, we went through a more detailed process of creating our manifesto, which then looked at we don't call them values, we call them heart sets. So rather than mindsets, we have heart sets and we have habits. So that was created, and that was a collective process that I would say 40 to 50 people in the company were involved in different stages. That's pretty much all the full-time employees of the company. So we had an initial scoping session where we spent a day, and there were maybe 10 of us. There were then all sorts of breakout groups at different stages, facilitated internally, while we worked up what the heart sets were, we worked up our values, such that when the manifesto was completed, pretty much every full-time employee would look at that manifesto and would recognize bits of it that they had an input in. So I think purpose does need to be, it can be collective, but it ultimately needs to resonate with the founder, or this. If it's a founder-run business, then it needs to resonate with the founder. It's really difficult if that doesn't happen, and it's quite difficult to do purpose by committee involving 40 or 50 people. I think for values, heart sets, habits, all those sort of things, the more people you can involve in it, the better, because then people feel a sense of ownership.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I can see that when you as a leader, like you got to live your purpose, right? Like
Yes.
it's your life, it's your mission, it's your, what you desire and your dream, right? So then people can buy into that once that you've determined, well, that's what I'm going to go for, and who is up for the right? So I think that makes total sense, that is more owner person driven, and then the values and or as you call them, the heart sets, are more the community and establish the culture that you have in your business. Yeah, thank you so much.
It's also interesting, Monica, because Thornton's Budgeons, it's been a Budgeons for many, many years before I took it over. So when you have an existing culture, it's really, you either have two cultures, a conscious one or an unconscious one. And if you don't think there's a conscious one, then there's an unconscious one there. And I massively underestimated quite how the unconscious old Budgeons culture, which had been built up over years and years and years, and was very command and control and very blamey and very fear driven, quite the opposite of where we're trying to go. How much, unless you, and that's why we built the manifesto, unless you consciously develop a different culture, the old culture will keep on winning through. And I massively underestimated the power of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, good on you for learning about it and changing it, right? So that's what matters. Yeah, thanks again.
Thanks, Monica. Great question. Does anyone else have a question for Andrew or Mark? If you do, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing anything on my end, Mark.
I'm seeing some hands here.
Okay.
Let's see here. Harmon, Marie-Jose. Let's, Marie-Jose, I've unmuted you. Harmon, I'll unmute you in a second. Go ahead, Marie-Jose.
I think she still looks mute on my screen, Mark.
Okay, let me try again.
Yeah, that looks better.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
Marie-Jose.
Yeah. Okay. Hi. So
Nice
thank you so much for showing up as a self-leader, and I have the opportunity to work together on the case study, and I had the same feeling then, and that was so beautiful. So to get a task or a purpose to do, and then to really hold back and really going inside to feel when you have the time to show up. So it was a beautiful experience what you did with your own employees. I had the same experience then, to really go first inside, to really take a pause and not go in an old system way of behavior, but really to feel first, where am I aligned to give my potential to the whole. And that was beautiful. So I really like to acknowledge the way you really give all the employees, and from there the case studies, and also how I know you, to expand that energy into the world. I really support that in a huge way. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you, Marie-Jose. And you've prompted a really interesting thought there. The old culture will fight back, and it'll fight back like hell. And the temptation to revert to type is so easy. And there were moments when it was really tempting just to kind of go back to the old way of doing things, because that's, you know, basically this is a culture that's at best is going 7 years, but the store has been there since the early 1970s. So quickly maths, and that's like 50 years. Okay, so 7 years versus 50 out of 50. It's a relatively short period of time, and of course, you know, our second longest standing employee retired last week after 23 years at the age of 88. So she joined us at 65 and she left at 88. How extraordinary is that? So she was there for nearly half of that time. But that firing, that kind of old tendency, when you're under pressure, the old way of doing things, it's the same with us as people. And an organization is only a collective of human beings. When we're under pressure, we revert to the old ways of doing things. We learned the strategies we produced as children to survive as kids, and they're not very effective. And it's a real important thing to see that and to be able to acknowledge it and then kind of say, okay, so now's our chance to do something differently.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew, we have a number of questions now. Also one in the chat from Rebecca. Let's see if we can give everyone the chance to speak. Harman, you're next.
I'll be concise.
Thank you. Hope you can hear me well. Hi, Andrew. So first of all, very happy to hear that you've recovered, or hopefully almost fully. And I guess that also has been a very profound process for you in terms of letting go control, even if you wanted to. I was wondering what other key success factors you have seen, or maybe the team, the self-leadership team has seen that actually pulled you through this unprecedented time. So I noticed Mark mentioned trust, making mistakes. Were there other elements or qualities or types of behavior that really, well, it sounds like your team excelled and even innovated in a way in these times, and not only survived? So curious if other factors played a role.
Two come to mind. One is safety and the other is vulnerability. So what we have done, and it's critical, is creating a safe environment for people to be vulnerable and to make mistakes. So we create a safe environment. So it was okay. So the little room at the back of the store I've referred to a few times, lots of tears are shed in that room. And that to me is a really good sign. If people are willing to cry in front of their boss, with their boss, with their colleagues, then that is that shows you've created a safe environment. People will not cry unless they feel safe. And a big fan of Brené Brown and her talks on vulnerability. And I think vulnerability is the single most underrated leadership criteria. If you're prepared as a leader to be vulnerable and to cry and say, look, I don't know what the fuck to do. I've screwed up. I really don't know. Crumbs, this is really tough. I'm having a really hard time. You know, we had some Zoom calls during this crisis where we have two co-leaders who run the business. We don't have a traditional manager. And the senior leadership team is the two co-leaders, me and our finance director. I was stuck in Germany. The two co-leaders were both off self-isolating. One of them had the virus. One of them thought they had the virus. And the finance director was the only one with the two deputy co-leaders who was actually physically in the store. And that was challenging for her because she had her elderly mother who wasn't well. So she really didn't want to be traveling quite a long way from where she lives to the store to be in the store, but felt she needed to be there. And there were tears in the people. People were saying, I can't cope with this. This is just too much. Yes, they felt safe to say that. And that's okay. So how are we going to work through that? And saying, look, you know, things like, well, we're just not going to survive. We can't cope with this. You know, we've just got to start closing. We can't open the door at 7 in the morning. We can't stay open till 10 at night. Great. okay, that's no problem. Let's just close the store earlier. People will understand. So I think the safety creates vulnerability, or being vulnerable helps create safety. It's a vicious, not a vicious, a virtuous circle. That's the word I'm looking for. And I think if leaders are prepared to be vulnerable, then other people will be vulnerable. And when people are vulnerable and they open their hearts, then we really start to get to the creativity and solutions.
Beautiful. Yeah. And it sounds like you've also massively embraced the not knowing.
Yeah. I mean, we really didn't, Harman. I mean, you know, it's like, what's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. We're not talking about strategic planning of next year or the year after. It's like, what's going to happen next week? I mean, no one knew. And still we don't know. You know, we're going into a situation with Christmas that we have no idea what the situation in London is going to be. Are people going to be able to meet? Are they not going to be able to meet? You know, probably the demand for big turkeys this year is going to be, you know, so there's a, you know, sort of little turkeys are what we're after. So, you know, we're doing this thing where the team of couple, we're doing this plastic-free Christmas. So we're really saying, stay local, reduce plastic at Christmas, and really trying to engage with the community, those who are around, because many, many more people who would normally be away at Christmas in our area will be around. So we're really trying to engage with them on this whole thing about you can actually do Christmas locally, and you can support local, not just us, but other local businesses. And you can reduce the plastic at the same time. So come and buy all loose, your vegetables, fruit and vegetables loose, rather than going to the big supermarkets and buying them in vast amount of plastic.
Wow.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Great questions, Harman. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Harman. And, you know, Harman and a bunch of other coaches deserve big credit for preparing the staff, because, you know, we had this beautiful project where the key people on the self-leadership team were coached. And this was like towards the end of last year. So we didn't know COVID was around the corner. It was. And I'm pretty sure that this, you know, that this was an amazing kind of setup for them to be able to respond in such a powerful way. So
absolutely. And there was some extraordinary work was done, and a big lesson I learned, which I always talk about, but then forgot, is that with coaching and this sort of work, it has to be voluntary. You offer it to people. We tried to force some people to do it, and it didn't work. And, you know, I talk about that with other companies, but in our own company, we went through a process and we tried to get everybody to do coaching, whether they want it or not. And it doesn't work. And I certainly know from that experience and others that when you offer it out, then it kind of, people who want it will grow to it, will come to it. And then actually other people will start to see transformation and they'll want it as well. It's not something you can force on people. And thank you for the acknowledgement, because yes, Harman and others, coaches were really played a huge role in this process.
Andrew, I would love to take one or two more questions if we can.
Yep.
We have one from Suresh. Suresh,
Hey, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Jeff, because Jeff was instrumental in putting it on the BRM Institute. I'm a regional ambassador with the BRM Institute, so thanks. He does a note, so I joined in. A quick question to all of you, right? And because I don't want to just hammer Andrew with all the questions, I wanted to open it up for everyone, because in this unprecedented situation that we are all in, the transformational leadership, how does that play a role? Because the revenues are hit badly, people are let to go. That's a very tough situation these days. So what would be a role of a transformational leader in a situation that things are not under our control? We don't know when the revenue will hit back. So should we hold on to the people? How are they? I mean, what's the kind of the mindset that the leader should have, considering that this is going to be the new norm and we do not know when we'll bounce back?
Yep.
How are we going to take care of the lives of people?
I can try to give one short answer to this one, Suresh, and maybe Jeff and Andrew can add it to that. For me, when I think about transformational leadership, I think one of the key characteristics is that these are leaders who can lead in uncertainty. You know, it's one thing to lead when when it's about, setting up a plan for the next 3 years, and then, making sure that everyone falls in line and that, that plan gets executed. And you can do that in situations where the environment is more or less stable, which, you can argue that it's never really stable. But now I think, what is really part of the moment in time that we are now is that nobody knows what lies ahead. Even our officials, government officials, have no idea what's going on and how to best respond. So everyone that we have been able to rely on, is also in this unknown space now. And I think that the characteristic of a transformational leader is somebody who can navigate that space. And one of the things that we need to learn to rely more on is our intuition. One of the attitudes that we talk about being at full potential is harnessing the intuitive mind and realizing that actually we can access a lot of what we need to know that is not in the books or not, in the kind of best practices, management best practices. And when we listen and tune into our own knowingness, the deeper knowing, the intuitive mind. So that is one of the attitudes. I would say experimentation and play is another attitude that we talk about, to be able to take a little bit of risk, to be able to dare to do different things and learn from it. Andrew spoke a little bit about that. So these are some of the things that come to mind in terms of the transformational leadership.
Can I make one quick comment? And I'm aware we're almost out of time. I think in these challenging times, for businesses with a purpose, to me, it's about going deeper and deeper into your purpose and what you care about. And those businesses who do that and who are all the things Mark said, they will thrive and survive. Those who don't have a clear purpose beyond just making as much money as possible, I think they're much more likely to go to the wayside.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Mark.
There's one more hand up from Jeroen.
Jeroen. Go for it, Jeroen.
You're still on mute. Can you unmute him, Mark?
I'm trying. Yeah, Jeroen, okay. Can you? Seems like I cannot unmute him. Okay. Well,
yep.
We have come to the end of the hour. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for all of you who showed up today, for all the great questions. I feel it was a very rich session today. On Monday, we have Laura from Teach for America. She's the Chief People Officer at Teach for America, and she's going to come and share some amazing stories of her leadership, transformational leadership. So I really hope all of you will be able to join on Monday as well at the same time. And, feel free to invite your friends, invite anyone else who you think would be interested. Pass along the landing page, the invitation page, and they will be able to get all the information they need that way. So thank you again. Any closing words, Jeff, Andrew?
Andrew?
No, I just wanted to say thank you, Mark, for setting this up. I'm not sure what else to say other than kind of just be yourself and trust yourself to be yourself.
Beautiful. Yeah, thanks everyone, all the participants for showing up and for a really exciting and meaningful interaction. Great questions, great discussion. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Andrew.
And thank you for inviting me. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.